Good morning, my name is Irungo Houghton and I speak on behalf of the 200 non-governmental organizations, or as we call them now, public benefits organizations, on this weighty matter that has preoccupied not just the nation, but the international community. First of all, before we start, I think as the CSO reference group, we would like to express our concern with the developments that are happening in Garissa currently. We are extremely concerned that there be no loss of life, that there be neither, atrocities by terrorists, or our defense forces do not harm any of the innocent as they go about restoring law and order and safety for all concerned. So that we thought we would start by essentially our sense of concern. And our prayers and our thoughts are with the people of Garissa now, with the law enforcement agencies, with KDF, to make sure that we do not see loss of life and property. Let me turn to the issue, our statement on the State of the Nation address by His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, and the list of shame that is currently being debated within the National Assembly. On behalf of 200 public benefits organizations working in 47 counties, the Civil Society Organizations Reference Group unreservedly supports the presidential call for all officials of the national and county governments to immediately step aside pending a thorough investigation of the allegations against them. Copies of this statement are being circulated. The scale and magnitude of the corruption has reached unprecedented levels. Conservatively, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission list of shame suggests that a staggering 9.7 billion shillings may have been looted from the government and the people of Kenya. Let's put this in a context in which 40 million Kenyans would understand. That is equivalent to 10 million radiotherapy sessions for cancer patients. It is also equivalent to rebuild or to construct a road a third the length of the Thika superhighway. And that is just these 170 so cases that we have before us. We acknowledge the public officials who have already stood aside. Chapter 6 of the Constitution assigns responsibility and authority on public officials to serve with dignity, to serve with integrity, and to maintain public confidence in their office. It is without a doubt that those named in the list of shame must step down to allow for more thorough investigations. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission must be empowered with prosecutorial powers and be released from the conflicting centers of power that we are seeing currently. The conflicting centers of power in the Commission hurts the anti-corruption drive, and the National Assembly must amend the statutes to achieve this. We call on the government of Kenya, and in particular the President of the Republic, to direct the immediate commencement of the Public Benefits Organizations Act of 2013. The Act contains a number of very specific transparency and public accountability prescriptions for public benefits organizations. Many of those address issues of transparency, issues of good governance, and issues of accountability, not just to the government of the Republic, but also to the people of Kenya. It is a tragedy that 24 months since its ascent by the former President, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki, it still waits operationalization. It is still sitting on a shelf somewhere in the Ministry of Devolution. Yet this is a primary pillar for good governance in the public benefits organization sector. We look forward to being held accountable to that law when it is passed. The strong statement by the President on corruption and human rights abuses that were contained in his national address last week creates an opportunity for public benefits organizations and various levels of government to work together to build public accountability, democratic governance, and active citizenship within the values and the national vision of the Constitution. We also welcome this. There has been too long a debate that the government and PBOs are working from the wrong script or from different scripts. As we heard last week, the President is upholding the rights of the human rights, good governance, and transparency, and we look forward to working with the government on this area. Lastly, The presidential address has created tremendous public expectation that within the next 53 days now, those with substantive cases against them will be charged in a court of law. This is not a time for resignation. This is not a time for cynicism on the part of the public. Cynicism will only help the corrupt to escape the arm of the law. We call on all sectors of our society to come together in an alliance for the protection and the promotion of national integrity at this time. We call on citizens to resist petty corruption in all our streets, in our offices, and all the places that it lurks. We, the public benefits organizations, will continue to watch this process to make sure there is integrity also in the way that we handle these cases. And secondly, we will continue to act. The clock is ticking, and we do not have much time. Thank you very much. So I think we share the concern that the tension between the commissioners and the secretariat is actually distracting us from essentially what is a singularly the most important task facing this nation, which is to come to the bottom of these 175 cases. So this is why we are saying that the tension between this needs to be brought to an end, and the only institution that can do that is the National Assembly. We would call on the commissioners that remain within the commission and the secretariat to not allow this tension to get in the way of the prosecutions that Kenyans expect from them in the next 53 to 54 days. So I think that is our position in terms of the centers of power, and that project deals with the questions from both the Nation and Capital FM. The second part of that, I think, is that Kenyans must resist the temptation to be resigned or cynical. Why? Because that produces the conditions for nothing to happen. If there is no public demand, if there's no public request for a judicious process that follows the rule of law, then it is likely we will see this go the way I think that Govedi has mentioned that previous cases have gone. So it is important that we continue to watch this process. The media is vital in this, in the sense that if you turn away and stop covering the stories, you will essentially give those that have been accused an opportunity to escape the scrutiny of the public, and secondly, possibly the ability to be able to negotiate their way or bargain their way out of the charges that are present. In some ways, what we have begun is a little bit like a plane taking off, and the AAC is essentially our pilot. And you can imagine if a whole plane continued to have conversations that went something like this: are we taking off? Are we about to take off? Are we serious? Is the pilot serious? What would probably happen is that pilot at some point would lose their confidence, and we would essentially lose the capacity to take off in a way that all planes have to, with a certain amount of momentum. And then at a certain point we can begin to remove our seatbelts, we can begin to ask for a drink, we can begin to watch the movies. But at this point we call on Kenyans to be extremely vigilant and to continue to press for this process to go right through to its conclusion. Because if we stop and begin to become either technically, what I'd call kind of, if we get caught up in legalese and in technicalities, the likelihood is we will see the same process that we've seen in many cases. The momentum will be lost, the courts will somehow not be able to convict, the evidence will disappear, and we will not see a judicious process. And again, these figures are huge. 9.8 billion shillings is something that we should take very seriously.
To add to what Yeru was said, regarding the question about if they are not found, or if they are found to be not guilty, then what do we do? We've got to remember two things. One, that as has been said many, many times, corruption, is an animal that fights back and fights back viciously. And so, that reinforces the need for us to remain really vigilant and to try and make sure that this does not happen. That in fact, the due process of law is followed, that everybody is accorded their rights, and that then, when they are found to be guilty, then the law follows its course. I think that's really, really important. Now, regarding the question around corruption in the NGO sector or in the PBO sector, one of our concerns has been all along that a law like the PBO Act is designed in a manner that tries to minimize the instances of lack of accountability and to heighten transparency within the sector. And this is something that we think exists in the PBO Act as it is right now. We feel that this law needs to be given a chance to demonstrate. Now, accompanying this law has been the work that the CSO reference group has been doing around developing a charter for public benefit organizations. And this charter, again, speaks to issues of accountability and transparency and good governance. And again, for us, provides a model situation that would enable us to literally show how it is possible to perform public service and do it honestly, accountably, and to the benefit of all. Tom.
Okay, my name is Tom Okech. Adding on to the issue of corruption in the CSOs, or the allegations of corruption, surely we have had our share, and one of the things that we've done is to participate in the formation or in the writing of the law, the PBO Act that Mr. Mbugua has talked about. And we've been pushing for the commencement of this law, which will serve a lot in the management or in the self-governance of the CSOs in this country. And this will even help us ourselves to be able to monitor ourselves, monitor all the players in the CSO sector. And we've said, if you look at the chapter, it is in the documents that you have, that we have committed ourselves to even be our brother's keepers, that will look at organizations that may be not working or being corrupt in the sector, then we will point them out. If the EACC fails to get, to sue the people, or some people are clear, one of the things that we are going to do is to form a technical committee that will be monitoring what is happening from day one. We started counting from the 60 days, 59 days, we're at 53. And we are monitoring what is happening every day, and also proposing ways that this could be done best. So we are on it, and we'll be seeing how things move, and we'll proposing best ways that this can be taken care of. And from time to time, we'll be coming back to the public and telling them what we have seen to be working right, and what is not working right, and what we propose as a way forward.
In your speech, you say that the EACC should be given powers to prosecute. And the same EACC, there are accusations that people close to the president advisor, is actually pressuring EACC commissions to resign. And you can see there is some influence from the state house itself. And the president is the one leading the fight on corruption. And then you're saying EACC should be given powers to prosecute. Don't you see that because they're under the influence of the state, it can be used as a tool to target innocent individuals who are maybe opposing the government or actually fighting corruption in real sense?
Okay.
My name is Eric from Africa. I'd like to commend the President on the bold move that he's taken. But as Africa, we are very skeptical on the same, because we don't believe that there is any serious corruption case that can be undertaken in a period of 60 days, let alone having 170 cases. We have an EACC that does not have that capacity. We need to be very vigilant in this, because this is like giving these people an undeserved leave of 60 days and having them back to their offices.
Okay, I think that there are 4 or 5 questions which I think are really good questions. The first, let me deal with the issue of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. I think, like you, we've been seeing in the papers the allegations by the commissioners that they are being offered either deals to leave the commission. Again, we would just reiterate that this is a distraction from the work that is required. We do know that the Commission and the Secretariat has been dysfunctional for some time, and this happened particularly when they became close to pursuing the Anglo-leasing cases. So obviously there is some connection between the tension that is currently there and the ongoing fight for corruption. But as non-ethics and anti-corruption commission officials, it's difficult for us to tell you exactly what's happened. So all we can do is perhaps suggest that the model that has been set up for this commission, which was the same model for all the Agenda 4 commissions that were set up after the post-election violence, does not work. And that perhaps what the National Assembly needs to look at is a serious frauds office or a anti-corruption office that basically focuses on investigative, and we think also it cannot just be an advisory body, it should be a prosecutory body. Now your question also is whether or not this body could be corrupted or could be influenced if it had prosecution powers. I think that danger exists with all law enforcement agencies, so it would be no different from the challenges that the DPP currently has in terms of making sure that his office and his officers continue to maintain integrity, to retain integrity in terms of the work that they do. So I don't think that is specific to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. We would call for prosecutory powers. We would call for less, confusing centers of powers between the commissioners and the Secretariat. This is really an anti-corruption department that should be given maximum space to investigate, prosecute, and if we're successful, convict the cases. The second question, I think, comes from Eric of AFRICOG, and AFRICOG is one of our members here. So it's a difficult conversation to have in the view of the public and in terms of press. But I think what we were saying is that in many ways I can see the skepticism. Corruption has been rife in this country. It has permeated all levels of the society. So there's naturally to be a bit of skepticism that this is going to happen. What we have learned is that something like 80% of the cases that were in the list, the files exist already. These are not new cases. About 30 of those cases are ready to go to court, and you've seen already yesterday, I think, announcements that there will be prosecutions underway. So we can see some seriousness, I think, in terms of that. Whether they're able to do this, what we know about the corrupt and the powerful and the privileged is that they have a lot of resources that they can muster in terms of the media, in terms of the judges, in terms of the lawyers. So it really is important that all of us keep together and keep the focus on, we want this process to be concluded as quickly as possible. Would I be concerned if it was 65 days? No. But what I would want to see within the next 53 days is some very high-level prosecutions taking place that would demonstrate very clearly that something has shifted. So we may not get the full 174, 175, we may only get a few, but at least let's go for those that are clear and allow people to be able not to have this hanging over their heads for more than 60 days. Because I think the other thing that needs to be thought about is that some of these people may be innocent of the charges that have come across. So we need to give them an opportunity also to be able to walk again with their heads high, rather than feeling that they have this shadow over them. I think on the third point, which relates to the task force engagement, yes, we have engaged the Cabinet Secretary for Devolution a number of times in the course of 2014. The CSO reference group sits on the task force that is currently reviewing the amendments. We're very happy to hear that one of the strongest calls from all the consultations that they've done has been to commence the Act. We support that call that has come from citizens and from leaders of public benefits organizations in the 47 counties. Lastly, I think what we would want to do is to have the opportunity to also be held to a high standard of integrity, and that is why we call for this Act. It's for no other reason that we too would like not to see a list of shame that goes through our sector. And the best way of doing that is make sure that we have a strong legal framework for that. So I think these are the points that I'd like to raise. I'm not sure that, Ezra, you want to pick up any of the other points.
The question was what the civil society think about that, and what would our view be, particularly of governors stepping down. As we said in the statement, we think that this is part of a process that ought to be respected, that if indeed they feel that they have, they are not guilty of anything, they should allow the process to go the full course, and they will have their day in court. They will be able to prove that they're clear of any of those charges and will get back to work. But we think that it is important to go through this process. Now, again, I just want to emphasize that our concerns about the EACC remain just as articulated even by yourselves, that there are these conflicting centers of power, and that this is something that the National Assembly should address and address urgently. We think that it does possess weaknesses that could actually destroy a lot of what could be gained through an effective fight against corruption, and that our vigilance is what will bear us through. That we all must remain vigilant. We must support what seems to be like the most sensible direction to take, and we must see that we have eradicated corruption in this country. So yes, we would like to see the governor step down. What we do? We think that there are different ways of applying pressure.
A police officer who is being paid 50,000 shillings attached to somebody who he is supposed to investigate a corruption case of 2 billion Kenya shillings. What do you think? He would just be told that, look, take only 5% of 2 billion shillings and you forget about this case. These things happen. How are you going to tackle this kind of a situation? Because this is a policeman who, after investigation, he is supposed to move around with his vehicles, government vehicle. And then after 5, he takes the matatu, goes back to his home in Dandora. He goes back to investigate somebody in a 2 billion shillings case. You think it is possible?
Well, let me just start to speak a bit to that, and I think Irungu wanted to make comment on that as well. But I think what you're bringing us back to is a discussion that I think has not received enough attention, a discussion around the notion of integrity, dignity and integrity. Because I can tell you that I recall watching a conversation in Europe, and it was a very similar situation to what you're describing, where several of us arrived at a border and required a visa, and one amongst that group did not have a visa, and there was a fairly high-ranking person that asked for that passport and said, let me go and deal with it, and went up to the immigration officer and said, Chief, tell me what it will cost to just deal with this matter once and for all. And he stuck out $3,000. Okay, I'm saying the proportions are different from what you were saying, but he said he put an envelope there with 3,000 shillings. The immigration officer did not even look at the envelope. He simply looked in surprise at that person and says, are you trying to bribe me? And he immediately called the police, and that person was arrested. So before they began to talk about the proportions of monies involved, for instance, he had switched into the mode that this person basically does not recognize my personal integrity, thinks that I can actually bend the rules by the use of money. I can be persuaded by money. And I think here what we're talking about is values, much more than the proportions that are involved. That is not to say that the notion of inequality is not something that we should be concerned about in this country. I would agree entirely, and especially coming from a human rights and social justice background, that this is something that this country has to take due account of. But I think that when we talk about corruption, we need to first of all question the values that we work with, and also recognize that that corruption will not be defeated by simply using money in other ways. That it has to first start with our personal integrity, and we have to have the values, and then we deal with the notion of corruption.
We've spent a bit of time looking at the EACC report. And one of the things that's been interesting with the EACC report that has not been highlighted yet, I think in any case, has actually been the total amounts of what is constituted within that list. Let me just give you a sense of what that is, and this is quite conservative. So at a rough estimate, if you list all those figures that are in the report, and some of the cases do not have figures, 9.8 billion shillings has been misappropriated. That is literally a transfer from public coffers or public, the treasury, and the institutions of government to private hands. A further 6.7 billion shillings has been identified as unexplained wealth that has suddenly appeared in the last 2 years with public officials elected and appointed. The total amount of investment, public investment, that is in danger or is at risk because of the level of corruption that this report details is 355 billion shillings. That is almost a third of the national budget currently. Now, as I say, these are just, I guess, what you'd call conservative figures. Much of this, we hope, will be explained in the next 60 days, and we hope that this number comes down. Now, my question to you, and we can perhaps, if you've signed in the registration list, we can send you the computation that we've done. We've done a very nice Excel sheet, which we had to stop using numbers because there were too many zeros. And for us in NGOs, we got a bit of a headache because that's a lot of money. So we now talk about billions and millions. But you get a sense of the scale of figures. Now, let me turn a little bit to the issue of integrity. What is the price that a public official would be paid to uphold a national value like integrity? Is it 25,000 per month? Is it 100,000 per month? Or perhaps we could go to the astronomical figures that we've seen commissioners receive within the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Authority of several million per month. Now, the thing we've learned with corruption is that if you can be corrupted, then it is only a matter of a price. It's only an amount. So that argument that I respect in terms of what do we expect of our police officers, of our nurses, of our headmasters, of our secretaries, of our messengers, all these people that is alleged that they have, or that they are prepared to sell the nation and sell the value of the national value of integrity. But my question would be this: is there a price that we can put on a value? Or is it something that we adopt as a nation, that we keep in place? Chapter 6 is very clear. If you seek an office, a public office, you have to occupy that office with responsibility, dignity, and integrity. It does not say, and your pay package must be commensurate to that value. Are we together? Now, let me just give you an example of why I think this is perhaps not a useful argument. Many of us probably remember Goldenberg. There is a name of somebody who actually blew the whistle on Goldberg. How many of us remember that name? Munyeke. Right? How many of us remember him? He was not paid thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of shillings to blow the whistle on a huge scandal that actually brought the economy to its knees. He did it not because of money, not because of his salary, because he believed in a better Kenya. Let me take you to one that is a little close to my heart. There is a headmaster called Headmaster Mugo at Langata Road Primary School, who for the last 4 years has been trying to protect his school from land grabbing at Langata. That property, as we understand, in the law courts is worth 140 million shillings. Now tell me, for a headmaster to do that for 4 years and to go up against very big companies, that takes a lot more than you could pay for. So we have Kenyans like this. My argument is this: why don't we put these ones in positions of authority to look after our money for us and not expect the ones that we put there to work for us only because they're paid well? National value has no price. It is simply priceless.
First, beginning with the issue of lifestyle audit, I would say that it would be best if this could cut across, as Edwin was asking there, because comparing one who is being audited against lifestyle and another who is being audited against a project that was done where money has been lost, it would be a bit difficult to know what what standards they were using when they were auditing one on lifestyle. And what I would say or propose is that if there is the audit on lifestyles, then all government officers then need to be audited on the lifestyles that they have, and if they can afford them from their salaries. So that's what I would say. The other thing is about the system. If we can have a proactive, if the government can have a proactive system, I think that it is already there. Like if you look at the Constitution, if we could follow what is provided in the Constitution, especially around integrity, if that could be followed well, that could be a proactive way of dealing with issues of corruption. But you see, when these are not followed and leaders are allowed to do things besides what the law provides for, then it leaves space, or it gives a leeway for things to happen, then reactions come after. But if you can, if the government can strictly ensure that the laws that are in place are followed, then this would be a proactive way of dealing with these issues.
One question was, what could we do? I think once the prosecution process runs its course, people are convicted, I think the state should move to seize assets. I don't think these assets should be left at the discretion of those that are found to be guilty. I think it should be, we should recover these assets. As we have heard, the figures are very large. The second point, I think, relates to proactiveness on the side of government. I think the first thing we need to recognize is that corruption is really the cancer of our society. It's really the cancer of our culture. And we need to find ways of identifying and protecting ethical leaders wherever they are, whether it is in the public sector, the private sector, and non-state organizations. We also need to find ways of, I guess, creating more effective processes to catch corruption, to create incentives for good leadership. And then lastly, the thing that I think I'm a little bit curious about is why do we not have safe reporting spaces within our institutions? Behind every one person on that list, there are tens of people who knew what was happening, right? Every one person that has been targeted, they can't be less than 10 people that knew what was going on. And my question is, how do we get those 10 people to have the courage to come forward in future and actually stop some of these cases before they become cases at this level? One very practical thing that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission could do is to give a protection and support for people to come through and essentially crowdsource or generate citizens' comments and evidence to help inform the prosecutions over the next 53 days. So I think this is probably some of the ways that we could see this moving forward. I think, as Thomas said, we are seriously considering setting up a technical committee to monitor the progress of the AACC and look at all options, both legal and otherwise, that can keep the pressure up and keep it unbearable for those public officials that have refused to step down in order that they allow the process to proceed.
Several of the questions that relate to, for instance, being more proactive or giving a lot more bite to the institutions that exist are within the realm of political will. There has to be the political will. And when all is said and done, we as citizens have to drive up this political will. We have to make certain demands. We have to bring our politicians to account for the absence of political will where that does not exist. And that's what I'd like to leave us with as a thought, that it is our responsibility when all is said and done to make sure that these losses that are accumulated by the public purse, for instance, are a thing of the past, and that will only happen if we insist that these changes that we are asking to see are actually made. Maskani, tuko maskani.